as you like. I'm sure if you were hangry to run in a session, it would be not the best.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it's gone 1 o'clock for me now.
Yeah, I'm just gonna wait a sec because I feel like, man, there's only 12. There should be like way more in, you know.
Cool.
Is there gonna be that would be a bad conversion rate, wouldn't it? 180 something to 12. Okay, I guess it's a minute past now anyway, so I better start. Yeah, I'll leave in.
Yeah.
Welcome everyone. How's it going? Hope you're having a nice Tuesday. My name is Shay Butler. You may have seen me before in some sessions, but I'm a program manager here at Tangent. For those of you that don't know, Tangent is located on Trinity campus, and we're the innovation hub specializing in training and support in creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And today we're here to learn a little bit about innovative people practices, specifically emotional intelligence, and how it can help you and your team. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we kick off. This session is being recorded and we've got really fancy and we're live streaming it as well. So if you'd prefer for your image not to show up on live stream, feel free to turn off your camera. And the other thing is, during the session, if you'd like to interact with us, we'd love to have that. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to pop them into chat and I will represent them to Jess. We'll also hopefully have some time towards the end for questions too. So we'll build in some time for that. So that's the little intro. So I'll just hand over to our learning partner, Jess Hayden. And just to introduce the session again, Jess will be doing a taster session on emotional intelligence for future leaders. How's it going, Jess?
Hi, thanks, Shay, and welcome everybody. Lovely to see you all popping in. It's always great when people make time in the middle of what is, I'm sure, a very busy day to join us. So we've been running these sessions now in emotional intelligence quite recently. And this next program that's coming up will be the third iteration of this program. And it's always really exciting to see how different participants on the program are applying what we're doing in their work. So I'll talk a little bit about, I suppose, what you can expect from the program, specifically on the topic of emotional intelligence, how it and how it's being useful for the participants, because we've had participants from really all different industries, different sectors, different roles within different sectors, and they've each found a way to apply it, and I think that's great. So I'm going to share some slides in a moment, and they'll just kind of cover the broad topics for us to consider today. If you've got questions, as Shay said, please pop them in the chat window. And it's always great when there's a few questions. I'll aim to run until 10 to 2, at which point then we can, if there's any questions I haven't answered throughout the session, we can maybe get to them. And also Shay will give us a bit more information about the program. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen now. Bear with me while I do that. Please excuse me, I'm at the tail end of the cold, as I imagine many other people are, so my voice isn't normally this scratchy. But here we are. So emotional intelligence for future leaders. This is a kind of a favorite topic of mine. I'm an organizational psychologist by training, so I've spent quite a bit of time, I suppose, reading and learning about people's behavior at work. And one of the kind of key behaviors I'm interested in is this ability that we have to kind of understand our own emotions and to understand those of other people, as they are kind of a key driver of behavior. So if we're we're trying to break boundaries, if we're trying to achieve firsts and innovate, it's really, really key for us to know kind of how we work personally, but also how others work as well, if we want those innovations to be successful. So I am one of the two co-founders of the Brave Lab, and we're an official learning partner of Tangent. So that's me laughing, and then my business partner Lucy McKenna is there beside me, and we'll be the two people that will facilitate this program. So what we do at the Brave Lab is we kind of support teams and organizations who are aiming for firsts. They either want to achieve a first or be a first in some way. And in order to do that, you need to understand quite a bit about how people work. So what we're going to cover today is we'll look at a few definitions of emotional intelligence and try and get our heads around what it is that we're talking about. You know, in my career, it's certainly the term itself has experienced a lot of popularity, I'd say, in the last kind of 5 years. And before that, it was maybe not as popular, but it's been around for a really, really long time as a concept. And then we're going to look in more detail at two aspects of emotional intelligence, the first being self-awareness and then self-management. And the reason we're going to focus on those is because that's kind of necessarily where you need to start. You know, we could say, like, let's talk about others and emotion management with others, or team dynamics or group dynamics. But really the absolute pillar of emotional intelligence and building it comes from working on yourself and understanding yourself. Once you can do that, then you can start doing it for other people. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Hopefully that sounds all right. It's a really deep topic to try and cover off anything in significant detail in an hour. So this is a taster. We'll be kind of skimming across a few things. We'll do a few exercises to give you an idea of the kinds of things we would be doing on the program for you to explore. And hopefully you'll walk away with something that you didn't know before. And you might walk away with a tool that you can apply to your work. So that's the aim. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is a question. And the question is, what do you need to perform at your best? So I want you to kind of think about that. And I know it's probably not just one thing. It's probably, I'm imagining there's quite a multifaceted answer you could give to that question. But while you think about it, what do you need to perform at your best? I'm going to tell you a little story about the image. So this is an image of the International Space Station. And if you're interested in space, and if you're interested in, you know, firsts and human achievement, there's a huge amount written about it on the ESI website, which you can access through the link there on the slide. But the space station is an enormous achievement by humanity. So it orbits every 90 minutes, flies around in orbit outside Earth. And it's so big that it couldn't be constructed and brought up into orbit. It had to be constructed in modules, flown up into space and constructed in space in orbit. I think that's incredible. There are thousands of people from across continents working on this to get it done. And it didn't exist before. So it's not like we're trying to achieve a thing that it's already there. This is one of those situations where people really had to imagine as they went about how to address problems, what it might look like, what success is. And we depend on this thing every day for so many things. And there it is up in the sky, whizzing past every 90 minutes. But the collective effort it took to get it up there would have been thousands of people working together and performing probably at their best for most of that time. So I use this image to kind of describe the kinds of things that are possible when we manage to figure out what it is that people need to perform at their best. So I'd like to come back to that question now. Maybe you've been thinking about it, or maybe you've been listening to me. Maybe some of you are multitasking and doing both. I for one, can't do that. But if you do have anything that you can share with us around what you need to perform at your best, pop it into the chat window and we'll have a look at those in a moment. But this is kind of one of the key questions that we would come back to again and again and again. And it's informed by a lot of the evidence around high performance teams and high performance communication. So as an organizational psychologist, I did quite a bit of reading around high performance scenarios. And a lot of the evidence that we have in what it takes for humans to perform at their best comes from situations like space exploration, elite sports, emergency response teams, surgery teams, people who have to do very high complex triaging tasks in really high pressure situations. We also see a lot of research coming from areas like where there's high risk to personal injury, or high risk in terms of other forms of capital. But what we find is that actually the highest performing teams figure out what each individual person on that team needs to perform at their best, and they try and cater to it, which is why I'm asking you. So I'm going to come over to the chat window and see what we've got in there. To be rested. Oh, brilliant. Okay. An approaching deadline. Yes, that works for me as well, Shane. Silence, says Shay. Sleep time for planning. Yeah, great. Understand your own strengths and weaknesses. Brilliant. Self-confidence, strong support network, an open mind, supportive and collaborative team environment, humor. That's a big one for me as well, Danny. Respectful energy, and to see the picture. Okay, clear vision, a goal, work-life balance. Great. So there's quite a bit in there about balance, actually, and having the time and being rested. There's a few kind of more inner sort of how your mind works, like the confidence, self-belief, having an open mind. So mindset's a really clear one. And then also that vision, the goal, like what does it look like? What are we even trying to achieve? And this is why I'm so interested in this stuff, because when we're achieving first, there isn't a blueprint, right? There, if we're innovating, the world has never seen what it is that we're doing before. And we need to kind of figure that out as we go. So it's a really, really interesting thing to say, well, if I'm going to perform at my best, I need a really clear vision. And if the thing we're doing hasn't been done before, how do we even get that vision together? So you can see why this is kind of an interesting area to dig into in the world of innovation. So I'm going to move on from here and start kind of thinking about, well, how can we possibly define what emotional intelligence is? Daniel Goleman gives us a really nice way to do that. Emotional intelligence is defined as the ability to identify, assess, and control one's own emotions, the emotions of others, and that of groups. So we've got the identify as the first step, assess, then what does it mean, and then control, which is kind of like the pinnacle of emotional intelligence, that not only can I identify what's going on and figure out what it means, but I have control over it. And to not only be able to do that for yourself, but for others and for that of groups. And the group stuff is the most complex, because we've got so many different types of interactions and variables going on, that if we started there, we probably would find it really, really difficult. So the best thing to do is start with what we know, start with ourselves. So if we're to break down the different kind of facets of emotional intelligence, then we've got the self-awareness side of it, where we're kind of conscientious and we understand what's going on for us. Self-regulation, where we can get to emotional stability. Motivation, where we can look at our own self-efficacy. Our empathy and our cognitive flexibility to be able to think what it's like to be in other people's shoes. And social skills, and how we build relation and how we build trust with others. So the two kind of facets we're going to look at are the self-awareness and self-management today. What's the use case for developing emotional intelligence? It's seen as a really key factor in being able to create psychological safety. And psychological safety is one of those things that is like the key ingredient in every single kind of thing that you can do with a team in an organization. It's the ability to take interpersonal risk at work. And if we think about like, what is that? What is an interpersonal risk? It's maybe telling somebody that you've got some difficult feedback for them. Maybe it's kind of putting your head above the parapet and going, does no one else see this fatal flaw in the business? Or it's actually speaking up when there's behavior maybe that's unwelcoming, that's creating a difficult environment or an unsafe environment. So there's lots of things that we can consider to be an interpersonal risk. And if we are able to take those risks openly, what that means is then we don't get the kind of more passive behaviors where people roll their eyes, or they talk behind one another's backs, or they'll only say what they really think in an anonymous survey. We see people kind of owning their information, owning their opinion, and bringing their full ideas and their full opinions and their all aspects of their identity to work. So that's the psychological safety. When we have that, when people feel safe enough to really say what they're thinking, we get really great results in team learning, people sharing resources, sharing knowledge, sharing experiences, backing each other up when there's a challenge, and repairing relationships after a challenge. And we see discretionary effort, so people basically putting in what it takes to get something done rather than only what they've been asked to do or only what's written down about what they should do. We see constructive feedback, and constructive feedback really is so key, especially in innovation, because if we're doing something the world has never seen before, we have to know whether or not we're on the right track, right? And the only way to know that is to get feedback. But feedback sometimes can be really not that useful. It's either like thumbs up, thumbs down. It kind of gives us some information, but it doesn't really give us the why. Constructive feedback will give us, here's the specific thing, here's the impact that it's having from my perspective, and here's what I recommend that you do. So that's constructive. We know what we can do with that. And we see far more innovation on teams that feel psychologically safe. We see them experimenting safely, assessing risk more accurately, trying out new things, learning more quickly from failure, because they feel safe. It's okay to fail because we know we're trusted, we feel safe to do that, and we can learn quickly. And we see psychologically safe teams not making the same mistakes again and again and again. And yeah, we see that kind of safe experimentation with the psychologically safe teams. So yeah, if we're kind of, we've talked about a lot of different constructs now already today. So just to kind of recap a little bit, we've got emotional intelligence as that ability to kind of identify, assess, and control our emotions, and that ability to be able to do that for ourselves, others, and for teams helps us to be able to create psychological safety. And that's what leads to all these other great things that we've got going on. So I'm just glancing over. I don't see any questions or anything coming into the chat window, but please do pop them in there if you've got them, and we'll come to them as we can. So yeah, to move on from here then, if all that stuff kind of sounds good to you, and I hope it does, this is where we start, is with self-awareness and kind of building that knowledge of ourselves. And I suppose, like for me as a practitioner, I always eat my own dog food. I always try stuff out on myself before I do it with the group. And I think the way of being a good practitioner in this space is doing your own work, doing your own self-awareness work. And from what I can say of my own experience, I've done everything from, I'm a qualified psychometric profiler. I have trained in neurofeedback therapy. I've trained in EEG, being able to map a brain. I'm a trained coach. I've done thousands of hours of facilitation. And I have to say, like, I feel like I'm only starting my own journey when it comes to developing self-awareness. I hope there's a bit there, but there's always something else to explore and discover. So I don't want you to kind of get the feeling like, okay, you can do a masterclass and then tick, that's done. It's actually just probably, from some of you, might be the start of a very long journey, or it could be the midpoint or whatever, but it's something that I don't think ever really ends. So
Yes, yeah, just a quick question, Jess, in the chat. Yeah. Sinead was wondering, could you repeat what makes for good constructive feedback?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, sorry, Sinead, I didn't see that there. Yes, so the model that I kind of talked through, I didn't have it on the slide there. It's called the AID model. Action, Impact, Do is what AID stands for. It comes from the world of nonviolent communication, which is a really interesting area in itself, which we don't have a lot of time to go into. But the action, impact, and do are action. What's the specific thing that the person did or said? What's the impact of it from your perspective? And what's your recommendation? The do. What do you recommend they do about it? So if you Google AID model for feedback, AID, you'll find lots on it, loads of videos and everything. It's a great one. And it's a tool I come back to again and again and again. Thank you, Shay, for that. And there you go. Hopefully that's one tool that people might find useful. Oh, brilliant. Okay, you found it. That's cool. This is great. So yeah, the brain is basic. Yeah, it's the seat of wisdom. But I think one of the things that we need to understand is a few of the working principles of the brain for us to understand what's going on in there when we're experiencing emotions. So the first thing to say is that every brain is unique. And one of the reasons why I chose this image is because it highlights the complexity of the human brain. This is a real image from a real human brain. It's by an artist called Greg Dunn. And if you want to look up his work, he's got loads of it online. It's really beautiful. But what he does is he takes out, this particular image is a sagittal slice, so it's taken from the center here, and we're looking at it from the side. So imagine if you'd just taken out a slice of my brain like that. And this is 1 micron thick, which is 1,000th of a millimeter. So it's super, super thin. What he does is to highlight the complexity of the brain, he goes over each neuron in the brain with gold, and then he puts a color wash on it to kind of contrast and show just how complex it is. So that's just one tiny slice of a human brain, and we've got this complexity throughout the whole thing. And obviously it spans the width and length of your skull. But the reason why they're all unique is because each time we learn something, or we have a new experience, and we see a physical manifestation of that in our brain. So we see our neural networks change when we think of something new, we learn a new task, or we find a new way to represent something. So that means that each one of us will have been born with a brain, but our brains are hyper malleable between the ages of 0 to 2, where we learn so many key things like how to walk and talk and breathe and eat. And then after a while, that kind of malleability goes down, but it never leaves us. That ability to change the structure of our brain never leaves us. And so what it means is each experience that we have, each new thing that we learn, each way of each different perspective we consider, they all have physical changes that we can see represented in the brain. So they have to be all completely different, right? Because none of us have had the same experience in life. So none of us will have the same brain. What I find really cool about that is everybody on this call has something completely different inside their skull. Doesn't make life interesting though, doesn't it? Makes things a little bit complex because we'll all see the world in a slightly different way. One of the other kind of key facts about the brain is that they really like to conserve energy. Your brain uses the most glucose from your bloodstream. And if I was asking you to do a task like ideate, like come up with fresh ideas for a thing that no one's ever seen before, that would really heavily rely on glucose in your bloodstream. In fact, if some of you hadn't had your lunch, you might find the task more difficult than those of you who have had your lunch. And we see this kind of play out in lots of different formats. And there's a really interesting study on parole decisions that are made either first thing in the morning, just before lunch, or just after lunch. And basically, if you ever find yourself up for parole hearing, try and get the just in the morning or the just after lunch slot, which is when the judges tend to be fed and there's glucose availability in their blood and they're more lenient in their decision making then. So we conserve energy, but what that means then is that we're saving as much energy as we possibly can for our prefrontal cortex. That's the bit just behind the forehead. And that's the bit that does strategic thinking and forward planning. It's the thing that considers the consequences of our actions today, tomorrow, and in the future. And that requires lots and lots of energy. So all the other stuff that we try to automate, and this is the stuff that happens at a lower level in the brain, and it's stuff that we are not aware we are doing. The stuff that happens here, that kind of strategic thinking and so on, that's the conscious part of the brain. The other stuff that's happening in a lower level of the brain is unconscious. We're not aware it's happening. Another kind of key thing that is fascinating, and it's probably the reason why I do the work that I do, is that we can relearn things with different parts of the brain even after damage. And this is called neuroplasticity. So that hypermalleability that we have between 0 to 2, I said it never leaves us. It doesn't. It does become slightly more difficult as we get older, but the potential to do it is still there. So what this means is the potential for us to continue learning for our entire lives is infinite. And we don't yet know the limits of the long-term memory. We haven't yet found an endpoint. It's like it's this many things that can go into a memory. I think that's absolutely fascinating. I kind of covered this already, but most of the information that we're processing in the brain is done so unconsciously. And all the kind of stuff like emotional cues, social cues, novel ideas, most of it is unconscious. And it makes us really bad at self-reporting. Makes us really bad at saying, oh, I'm feeling a little bit threatened, and I think that might be because of this. We tend not to be very good at that because it's unconscious. We're not aware of it. And that part of our brain doesn't have words. So there's a kind of an interesting point to illustrate this, is that we'll be processing silences, normal cadence of silences in a person's speech. But if a silence goes on longer than 4 seconds, we become quite unsettled. And you can ask people whether or not they liked a conversation, or they thought a conversation was any good. If there are seconds that last longer, if there are silences that last longer than 4 seconds in it, they're likely to say that the conversation made them feel really uncomfortable. But they can't really tell you why. They might be able to kind of reason as to why that is. So there's lots of interesting stuff that's happening at a lower level that we find it difficult to access. So being able to do that is this kind of key part of emotional intelligence. So I'd like to start with just a short exercise. And for this, all you need is a pen and paper. So hopefully most of you have that within reach. And I'd like you just, if you have a preferred hand, because not everybody does have a preferred hand, take the pen in your preferred hand and write your signature. So. And then when you've done with that, just post in the chat window, how would you describe that experience? Natural shade. Effortless, easy, enjoyable, mindless, second nature. Yeah, so it's happening at a lower level in the brain. You're not aware that you're doing it. And so there's not much to report, okay? So if I ask you to do the opposite, take the pen in the non-preferred hand and do the same thing, write your signature again. And once you've done that, report back on how you would describe that experience. Frustrating, says I'm taxing. A mess, oh no. More focused, slightly challenging. Discombobulating, childlike, needs concentration. So difficult, feels awkward. Okay. Well, congratulations. You've just, you've done some really interesting things there. You've operated outside of your preferences, and your brain is maybe going, whoa, why haven't we done that? We haven't done that maybe since we were 3 or 4. But what you've also done is you've swapped hemisphere for the motor control of the other hand, the non-preferred hand. For me, that's my left hand is the non-preferred. And what most people find is they first of all, they don't even know how to hold the pen. It's like, oh, how do I hold this thing? They don't even know how much pressure to put on the page, get the ink flowing appropriately. They don't know how to shape the words, and they certainly don't know how to put the flair on the look of the signature, which you would have with the preferred hand. And that's something lots of you, somebody said there, yeah, overthinking needs concentration. Yeah, you have to think about it way more. So we've gone from, with the preferred hand, an automated task that's happening subconsciously, to with the non-preferred hand, a non-automated task that you have to think about every aspect of it in order to achieve it. Now, they're both your signature, they both represent you, they're both your name, and you can do it. But we just have a strong preference for one, and therefore it's been passed to a lower level in the brain. If you practiced with the non-preferred hand, a few days or even for a week, you'd find that you'd quite quickly make progress with it, and your 2 signatures would become more alike. In fact, if anyone's had that experience where you've hurt your preferred hand and you had to write with the other hand, you'll find that like it is like it does. People say it feels painful, or it's like it's a lot of work. Yeah, the high effort is really, really high to switch preference to the other side of the body, but it is possible, and that's that neuroplasticity at play as well. So we've just explored a few different aspects there. We've had an experience of an unconscious process in the brain, a conscious process in the brain, and swapping kind of hemispheres in the brain, and how awkward and difficult that can feel. But we know that if we practice that over time, it would become, we would have less effort for us, and we could, in time, we could write with either hand. So these kinds of preferences, we see these in so many aspects of human behavior. Handedness is just one, but we see this in, preference for tea or coffee, apples, oranges, Apple or Android, it goes on and on and on. And what we can kind of see is that how skills and competencies are actually represented neurally when we image the brain. So when we can actually see when you're doing something that for you is either a novel task, you've never done it before, or something that's a learned task where you've done it many times before. And learning new things literally requires new neural pathways to be formed in the brain. So those things that are in your comfort zone, let's say the writing with the preferred hand, that's when you're operating within your preferences, and you're likely to experience, not having to think about it too much. It's an energy conservation thing. The brain isn't drawing out too much glucose. And most of the time, if we can, we'll probably stay in our comfort zone and we'll stay operating within those preferences. And when we're trying something new, that feeling of maybe writing with the non-preferred hand, that's the learning zone. We're trying something new. It might feel awkward, might be proud of the result, we might make a few mistakes, but over time it would kind of gradually come into the comfort zone if we built up a strong enough neural network for it. And then kind of when we push outside that again, we get the kind of the growth zone, the stuff we've never even contemplated before, never tried before, and that can feel really quite uncomfortable for a while. This process of self-awareness around, how to identify, assess, and control your emotions can feel a little bit like that sometimes. So it's kind of just a good thing to note that, as we're doing this, you might feel a little bit awkward, a little bit uncomfortable, but with practice and with time, it'll come into the comfort zone. So you see a great question there. Is this a good exercise for the brain, stopping preferences? Yes, Danny. But what it does is it thickens over time, like over lots of time. It thickens the corpus callosum, which is the bit that connects the two hemispheres of the brain. So your brain is in two halves, and the thickness of that is generally speaking is a good thing for the brain, and being able to do that can protect against some neurodegenerative disorders as we get older, and it's certainly seen as a protective factor in people with dementia. So you don't have to just do it with your writing hand. You can brush your teeth with the wrong hand. And like, I say this as a person who's, studied the brain and stuff, and yet I try with the other hand to brush my teeth in the morning, and I just don't have the patience for it. It's easy to say, not as easy to do, but do try it. Like, it is good. Another thing that's excellent for the brain is bilinguality. So if you or not even bilinguality, but like if you have more than one language that you can think in, it's a really, really good tool for cognitive flexibility. Okay, so I'm going to move on from here. So I want to do a quick exercise in noticing friction. One of the things that we're going to kind of dig into on the program is things we value, and how when we have particular values and we feel that they're coming into friction in work, that can create a level of dissonance for us emotionally that is really difficult to handle. And what happens when we experience cognitive dissonance is most of us will actually alter reality in order to make it match what's going on in here. And so it's quite a profound thing to happen. It's happening all the time, otherwise we wouldn't kind of get through the day. And it's a protective thing that we do. And it is a necessary thing, I think, for us to be able to do. But we see it all the time in organizations. We might, want to believe that, we do good things, that we enjoy our job and so on. And so in order to make that true, let's say one of those things isn't actually true in reality, we may actually alter reality in order to try and make it match our beliefs and our values. So let's, without saying too much more, let's kind of get into it for a moment. So there's a lovely painting by Fritz Superbuller, Admiration. I wish I could channel that girl's energy every day. She just is totally in love with herself. It's brilliant. But this is what I'd like you to think about it. Who do you admire? What is it about that person you admire? Maybe it's yourself, maybe it's somebody else, a famous person, somebody alive, somebody dead. But who is it? Who do you really admire? When you've had a moment to think about that, pop those 3 words into the chat window, or even 1 word is fine. Anything at all is fine. Okay, so I see Greta Thunberg is up there. So what is it about Greta that you admire? Okay, generosity, kindness, confidence, sociability, kindness, funny, confident, kind, great, courage. Lovely. Confidence has come up a lot there, and kindness, ability to change, grateful, positive, diligent, caring, honest, fun. Lovely. Articulate, critical thinking, intelligence, very nice. So these things that we admire, it's just sorry, checking on this there. My grandparents, passion for lifelong learning and helping supporting others. Lovely, very, very nice. These things that we tend to admire in other people are kind of a key to what it is that we value. And values are a really, really interesting construct for us psychologically. There tends to be a couple of things, especially in the workplace, that we will value over other things. So another way to kind of go about this is to give you a huge, big, long list of words. We could have fun, we could have generosity, we could have intelligence, we could have caring, kindness, we could have all those kind of words. And I could ask you to pick your top 20 and then narrow that down to your top 10 and then narrow that again to 5 and try and get to the kind of top 3. And we'll find with most people, whatever way you go about it, there'll tend to be one thing that is a deal breaker for them. If they don't have this one construct in their work life, they'll walk away. The friction will be too much for them that they just can't handle it anymore. So we've just started our exploration with who is it you admire and a quick think about, well, how would I describe them? Another way to do this is who makes you jealous? And this one works really well for me. And this is a question I got from Lucy, my business partner, whose picture I showed earlier on. What is it about you that makes you jealous? So have a little think about that one. And if you're happy to, you don't have to share who it is, but just the things about them that make you jealous. Okay. So I'll come back, Anna, to your question in a moment there. Beauty, magnetism, charisma, positivity, sense of security. Okay, interesting. I put my own in there because I could think of one quite clearly, and it's just a new organization that's really good at putting themselves out there, and they're in nature and they're being really brave at what they're doing. But this kind of the stuff you admire and the stuff that makes you jealous of others, it can tend to lead us to kind of the crux of what it is that we really value. Yeah, those who blaze their own trails in work, not confined to titles, lovely, and ambition, great. Yeah, and on that one, like, what if you don't experience jealousy? That's okay. It can be hard to think of. I think it's one of those things that if you struggle to think of something that makes you jealous, it might be one of those things that will pop up in the next week for you. But I would kind of tune into, like, if you're more aware maybe of somebody's work or not, whether you experience the jealousy, but for some people they will, and it can be a clue. But if you don't, you don't. It's more of an admiration. Yeah, great. So it can just give you a nice clue to the kind of stuff that's important to you, especially in the workplace. So those things that we admire about others or make us jealous are usually things that represent what we value. And when something at work doesn't sit well with your values, it can create that internal friction and stress, otherwise known as dissonance. So if you kind of look back at your career and you think about times maybe where you just weren't loving it, maybe you walked away from a role, or you decided to change job. There's probably something in there, a value that there was too much friction with it for you. Now you can say, oh no, it was a bad manager or something else, but maybe behind the bad manager was the way in which they were treating you. That meant one of your values was being not fulfilled properly. There's a tendency for most people, as I said, to have a deal breaker value. So if you can figure out what that is for you, it's really great. You can start thinking about your career, how you pursue opportunities, how you go about stuff in terms of, can I get this thing fulfilled? If so, I'll go for it. And it can be a nice way to make decisions, especially when it's not clear what the right decision to make in a given situation is. So in the program, we would dig a bit more into values and what they are. The other side of it is, once you kind of figure out what they are for yourself, you have a better chance of being able to do it for somebody else. And for those of you that are managing people, you might find that there's somebody whose reaction you really never expected to a way you went about something, or a way you imparted information, or a change that happened. And maybe by understanding what they value, it would give you a clue, and it wouldn't be as much of a surprise for their behavior if you knew about it beforehand. Okay, so we're going to move a little bit into self-management. We did 2 quick things on self-awareness around preferences and values. And now we're going to talk a little bit about things you can do to kind of manage your own emotions. So I want you to think about the course of the last week, and feel free, if you want to look at your calendar, your diary in another tab, or if you've got an old school one, flick through it and just make a list of the different things you've done in the course of that week. It could be, a meeting, conversation that you've had, an event, doing the shopping. You can look at things from work and personal. I'm not going to ask you to share it, but just to make a quick list. Give you a few moments to do that. So if we had more time, I'd let you generate a really long list, but hopefully there's a few things on there now, and you can use those things to think about this next task. So if you think about the kind of energy it took for you to complete each of the tasks, and you broadly said whether it was high or low energy. So it took a lot out of you or it didn't. And if you thought about as well, the emotion that the affect that you experienced doing the task, whether it was largely positive or largely negative, that would allow you to map those different tasks onto what you can see here, this energy quadrant. And it's a really, really insightful way of thinking about what happens in a given week. So this is this managing your energy, your time quadrant comes from Tony Schwartz and colleagues. And it's a tool that can be really insightful to help you kind of rebalance, especially after a challenging period. So on the side there where we've got things that take a lot of energy, so it's high on the energy, but we feel positive about them, they're in that kind of quadrant that we call the performance zone. And this is where we're probably feeling energized, and we're probably performing at our best, but we will probably be tired after it. And then the stuff that we've got, it takes a lot of energy, but we've generally negative affect. We don't feel that good about it. That's the stuff that is described as being in the survival zone. So we probably might feel frustrated. We might feel a little bit overworked. We might feel like just generally not enjoying it. We may not look forward to it. Then we've got the stuff that doesn't take a lot of energy, but makes us feel bad. These are the kind of tasks where we're kind of just wandering through them. We may feel a bit hopeless or distracted while we're trying to get these things done, and they're not making us feel great. And then we've got the stuff that makes us feel good but doesn't take a lot of energy, and this is what they call the recovery zone. So if you were to take each of those tasks that you wrote down and map them onto this quadrant, to see, like, roughly speaking, how much of my time am I spending in the performance zone, survival zone, burnout zone, recovery zone. You can be quite insightful. For many people, they'll find that they're kind of clustering around one area. What's really interesting, let's say, is if you find everything on the negative side emotionally, everything you're doing in a given week is making you feel bad. That's not great. Okay, that shows us, well, we know what we need to do. Where I would start then is, what can you do in the recovery zone? What's the least energy thing you can do that's going to make you feel good? And what changes would we have to make to those high energy tasks to put them in the performance zone that would make us feel better? It's usually a relationship dynamic. It's usually the stuff that's in that survival zone is a meeting with people that we just don't get along with, but we have to do it. What would it take to transform the relationship and have the meeting be a thing that goes into the performance zone? So it can be what I love about this is you can do it quite quickly. You can spend kind of as short or as long as you like on it. You can kind of take it away and even do it on a weekly basis just to see how much of my week am I spending in these things. But the general rule is for as much time as you spend in the performance zone, you need to match that with time spent in recovery as well, with low energy stuff that makes you feel good. So I think it's at this point that I usually like asking people, what do you do for recovery? My favorite, my least energy, my lowest energy thing that makes me feel good is I like texting really bad jokes to a friend of mine. And it just gives me the giggles for about 3 minutes when I imagine him. He's got a really high profile job. And I'm imagining him in these like really high profile situations, and he gets this stupid text message from me. And because he always reads my texts, God love him. And it just makes me feel good for a few moments. So I don't know what it does for our relationship, but it's very self-serving. But yeah, this is the kind of, like, if we're then to kind of map this to emotional, how we feel, these are the kind of emotions that are attached. You know, when we're in that performance zone, we're enthusiastic, optimistic, challenged. Survival zone, we might be impatient or irritable. Burnout, we're just exhausted and we feel hopeless. And recovery, we're relaxed, we're kind of rested, we're maybe more receptive to things and peaceful. So if you've struggled with placing the tasks from your week in the quadrants, sometimes you can ask yourself, well, how did I feel after it? And that emotion, the way you're describing the emotion, might help you map it a little bit easier. What is Sarah's name here? Yes, I can relate to those meetings that drag you down. Yeah, for sure. The great thing is there's usually something we can do to change them. So yeah, I mean, just in terms of, just to kind of finish up on the concept of resilience there and mapping energy, there's a couple of things that you can do. Well, there's a lot of things you can do. The main thing is spending time in recovery. But kind of tuning into these three things, the PAL acronym for preferences, awareness, and listen, I think can kind of set you back on the right path, especially after you've experienced quite a challenging period. So the first thing is do tasks in the comfort zone, the stuff that you feel good at, that you feel confident at, that will make you feel good about yourself and maybe bring your confidence level back up. And it's a really good way to recuperate after a stressful event. Try to get the newer tasks or the less preferred tasks done early. We use a mantra on this program called Eat the Frog. I don't know if anyone's come across that before, but imagine if you had to eat a frog every day. When would you do it? Would you do it last thing just before you go home and you turn the lights out, or would you do it first thing in the morning? If you're doing it just before you go home, you're spending most of the day thinking about the eating of the frog. So yeah, aim to do it first. Fiona and Danny are up there. I'm a big fan of frogs, and I do not condone the eating of frogs. It's a concept. So, but yeah, try to get those kind of newer things, the less preferred things out done in the day, so that you're freeing yourself up cognitively and emotionally for the stuff you will prefer to do the rest of the day. Develop the awareness of your own needs. Go back to that question I asked you at the very beginning. What do you need to perform at your best? Check in. Are you feeling overwhelmed? And are some things that you normally deal with fine, do they feel overwhelming? And that's a real sign that something's causing friction and try and figure out what it is, you can do something about it. And then the final thing is listen to the people around you if you're accused you're not behaving the way you normally are. Most of the time when we're under stress and pressure, it's the people around us that notice first and not us. So somebody who's kind of like, are you okay? You don't seem yourself. Pay attention to that stuff. Listen to it. Take a break and do stuff to recuperate and recover. Okay, so I think we're coming towards the end. Yes, we are. And just the last thing I wanted to do is kind of show you what the breakdown of these topics are in the program itself. So we split emotional intelligence actually into 2 separate workshops because it's such a big topic. These are 2 half-day workshops, or they're 3 hours, Shay, I think. But in the first one, it's me at my best. So we focus on self-awareness. So we dig more into preferences, values, and emotions. And then we talk about resilience, peak performance, and balance. So that's the first workshop. And then the second workshop, we talk about my team and relationships. So kind of entering into that, how I relate with others, developing social awareness with empathy tools, responding to change, passive resistance. We use a really great model called the SCARF model. If you Google it, you'll find lots on it, which is developed by David Rock. He's a social neuropsychologist. And that is great, some great tools there for developing social awareness. And then finally, we kind of dig into relationship management, looking at praise, motivation, difficult dynamics, and conflict. So that's the breakdown of the program. And it's been lovely to do this talk with you today. Thanks for all your input and stuff in the chat window. I'm going to hand you back over to Shay now to wrap us up. I'm also happy to answer any other questions as they pop up.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Jess. Who knew at lunchtime we'd be swapping hemispheres in our brains, huh? Nice activity. Jess, thanks a million for that taster session on emotional intelligence, and indeed for running into a little bit of an explanation about what the program covers. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about that program, and then we'll move into time for questions. So I'm going to share my screen, and I think you can see my PowerPoint now, but essentially what you just got there was a really nice opportunity to sample some of the content that we cover in this 8-week program, and also I suppose how we cover it. So you'll notice that we weren't just speaking to a PowerPoint, but there was lots of activities, and all of our programs and our learning experiences and tangent, follow that structure. But let me just talk a little bit about the deeper 8-week program. So delivery happens online, except for the very first session, which is hybrid. So you have the option to come in, meet other classmates in Tangent here on Trinity campus, or indeed, if you can't make it in, maybe you're not located in Dublin, you can attend online. Following that first week, there's 8 weeks in total. The sessions will always run midweek, generally on a Wednesday from 10 to 1 for the longer sessions. And we have 3 shorter greenhouse sessions, which run from 11:30 to 1. The overall total duration for the program is just under 20 hours. There's no assessments. There's no requirement for study or work outside of class time, but some of you may choose to do it to progress on some of the challenges or things that come up for you as you learn the theory. The price for the program is €750 for the early bird, and that's for anyone who's confirmed and paid before the 6th of January. And then the full price is €950 per person. You can see then just below the pricing are the outline of the sessions. Jess has kind of gone through this already, but there's 2 sessions on emotional intelligence. Then we'll follow up with a session on team dynamics and how good team dynamics can lead to high performance teams. And then there'll be a session on diversity and unconscious bias. And then interspersed amongst those content sessions are our greenhouse sessions. And our greenhouse sessions are the time where you can bring a challenge that's related to your work and your organization that's pertinent for you at the time, and you can use that challenge and apply that to the theory that you've learned. So we found a lot of value here for participants in previous iterations in these greenhouse sessions, because it's really like an open moment where you can share, get feedback from your peers, and really realize that you're not the only one potentially with this challenge, and that you can, there's comfort in sharing, I guess. Finally, then, one of the last content sessions that we cover is storytelling. And this is where we will, build out your storytelling capability so that you can bring everything that you've learned in the program over the course of the previous REITs and kind of tell that story back to your organization, hopefully to implement some sort of change related to your challenge. That's a summary of the program. What's coming up next is we have more tasters. So next week at the exact same time, lunchtime on Tuesday, we have a taster session on team dynamics. And that we will be with Jess's business partner, Lucy, who she mentioned earlier. And then the following week, we have a taster session on diversity and conscious bias. We also have the program page, which is open currently for applications. So I'm going to pop in 2 links into the chat in 1 second. The first link will be the registration page for the upcoming tasters over the course of the next 2 weeks. And the second link is for application to the program should you want to sign up for that. I am going to give time for questions, but first off, I would like to ask you all a question. So I'm going to do some empathy interviewing here, and I'm just going to launch a poll. And really just interested with people's preferences in terms of how they'd like to attend a program like this, whether you would like it spaced out, like I just explained, over 8 weeks, or whether you'd prefer a more condensed version over the course of 2 or 3 days, which would be in person. So I can see some results coming in. So thanks very much for popping that. We'll give it another minute or 2. Okay, I think we have most people in. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll. I'll share the results. And then I'm going to stop sharing. So you can see there that we have kind of a 50-50 split, really. Some people would like condensed and some people would like it spaced out. So that's interesting for me. So maybe we'll have to run the program twice in both of those different formats. So we'll open up for questions now. I know we've only a few minutes left, but if anyone has a question, feel free to pop it into chat, or if you want, you can unmute and just ask verbally. I am also going to pop in a feedback form into the chat. This is the shortest feedback form in the history of time. It will take you about 50 seconds to complete. So if anyone would like to do that, please click on the link after the session, and we'd love to hear how the session went. But now we'll open up for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to pop into chat, or you can unmute. If not, no need to hold on. We realize we might have a meeting coming up, or maybe you have a late lunch coming up. But if anyone does have questions, feel free to stay on, and you can ask. Thanks, Rory. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Louise. Thanks, Una. Thanks, Martin. Okay, everyone, last chance for a question, or forever hold your peace. Hopefully we will see some of you next week on Tuesday. Thanks, Anna. See you later.
Okay, Shay.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks. I'm gonna head then, if that's okay. You don't need.
Yeah, can I just one thing? Would you be able to could you just share the slides when you have a chance, and I'll share them out with people.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. That was great. I think there was lots of the activities were great. Just so there was a nice mix.
Cool. Okay. Chat to you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah. Cheers. Bye bye.
Recording stopped.
Actually, I just stopped the recording there.